My name is Ann Helmreich. I'm the director of the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities. And on behalf of myself and my colleagues in the center and the Office of Interdisciplinary Programs, welcome. I'm so pleased to see you all here this evening. I'm here to introduce tonight's lecture, but before I do so, a little housekeeping, if you will. If you have a cell phone with you, can you either silence it or turn it off, please? Also, on the way in, you should have received a comment card, and we're always interested to hear what you think. So on your way out, if you wouldn't mind dropping those off, we would be greatly appreciative. Tonight's lecture is co-sponsored by the Center and the Richard N. Campen Lecture in Architecture and Sculpture, and we're pleased to have members of the Campen family with us. Richard Campen was an important contributor to our understanding of architecture in Ohio. He authored numerous books, including Ohio, an Architectural Portrait, Outdoor Sculpture in Ohio, and Architecture of the Western Reserve. And I was just sharing with the family that his walking tour of downtown Cleveland, which was prepared for a meeting of architectural historians, is still circulating around historians here in the city. So we're very pleased to honor his legacy by hosting the 2007 Richard N. Campen Lecture in Architecture and Sculpture, to be given by one of the leading lights in American architecture today, Jane Weinzapfel. Jane Weinzapfel is the founding partner of the firm Leers, Weinzapfel Associates of Boston, which recently received the American Institute of Architects Firm of the Year Award, the first female-owned firm to be so honored. The award recognizes a practice that has consistently produced distinguished architecture for at least 10 years. The firm has earned numerous awards and accolades for their buildings, which include the Cambridge School of Weston, the Mugar Center for the Performing Arts, Harvard University Science Center expansion, the MIT School of Architecture and Planning, and the University of Pennsylvania Gateway Building. And I point to campus buildings because I believe our audience here can appreciate the constraints that building in an urban campus can present, as well as the challenges of designing for enhanced social interaction, all of which you will see beautifully and successfully addressed in tonight's lecture. The chair of the AIA jury has praised the partnership for, quote, their commitment to the public realm and to the craft of building in dramatically complex projects as a remarkable commitment to ingenuity, resourcefulness, and design excellence in the most extreme circumstances. Architectural critic Robert A. Clement notes that our speaker's work appears to be driven by fundamental values, searching for expression appropriate to the place and even to the budget and capacity of the builder. Jane Weinzapfel gained these skills through a succession of vital experiences. She became a fellow of the American Institute of Architects in 1994. She was a visiting artist in the American Academy in Rome in 2002. She has taught at MIT and been a visiting critic at the University of Arizona. After working with a large architecture and planning group, she founded an independent practice in 1980, and in 1982 joined forces with Andrea Leers to found Leers Weinzapfel Associates. Their work in its clean lines, respect for material and function, and appreciation of detail epitomizes the aesthetic and significance of modernism. It brings to mind the words of Mies van der Rohe, who wrote, "Architecture is the real battleground of the spirit. Architecture depends on its time. It is the crystallization of its inner structure, the slow unfolding of its form. Architecture as the true symbol of our time." Jane Weinzapfel's work is the best symbol of our time we could hope for, elegant, refined, and rooted in place. Please join me in welcoming Jane Weinzapfel.
Well, thank you, Anne, very much for that fulsome introduction, and also for inviting me here. I'm delighted to participate in your cityscape exploration, and especially for the honor of giving the Richard M. Campen Lecture in Architecture and Sculpture. And of course, everything that you see tonight is done by a group of architects, not just me. My practice in Boston was founded by Andrea Leers and myself. We have principals Josiah Stevenson and Joe Price. We also have 5 associates, and we have many architectural designers and architects who work with us. So this is a collegial effort that you will be seeing in all of the projects. And I'm going to try to go fairly quickly because in talking with you, there have been some questions already, and I'm hoping we'll get time to discuss those, and if not, we'll do it in the questions and answers. In the past, let me pull this up, just so we know where we are. You might be in the wrong place otherwise. But the food is good, so. In the past, Andrea Leers and I have referred to our work as responding to composite conditions, focusing on building and rebuilding, adding and transforming civic and community structures in conditions of extreme technical and urban complexity. Today, I'd like to continue this discussion with a few examples from our recent work, this time in the campus setting, as Anne alluded to, which suggests an approach I will describe as tailor-made response to each set of complex conditions, one which conveys both conceptual consistency and specific character. When the metaphor of tailoring was invoked by the late Spanish architect Enrique Miralles some years ago at a conference to describe his extraordinary mode of making architecture, cutting, fitting, stitching, it struck me as particularly apt. I found it a valuable way to articulate a set of intentions and operations which constitute a counterproposal to the heroic gesture. There are many architects here tonight, and they will all understand about the heroic gesture and the idea of creating a place for people, one that fits its place and its purpose. The idea of made to measure begins with the idea of making, and it suggests that the constructive process itself is at the heart of the architectural enterprise. Whether handcrafted or computer described and machine produced, the tangible physical result of design is its fundamental expression of making. Material, assembly, and detail are the tactile and sensual means by which architecture is experienced. New requirements and for performance and fabrication possibilities are driving much innovation research in this area. All good tailoring requires good fit, and it's critical in my view that architecture fits its purpose, its role in the ensemble with other buildings in the city, its size, its scale. And the idea of measure includes the key concepts of precision, proportion, and refinement, which together give design its rigor and intensity. Finally, both the tailor and the architect create form, shape, and silhouette. In other words, identity. And there are some other words related to this, the idea of wrapping, which we perhaps see in this Issey Miyake. I'm not sure we'd call it a dress, garment. Weaving, all of the descriptions we talk about in cities and in architecture, the weaving of materials, the fabric of building, the fabric of the city, and of fitting, the precision of fitting, the proportion of fitting, as in this Korean chest. More fundamentally, the metaphor points to an architecture which draws its inspiration from both matter and from circumstance. And it's this connection which has resonance for me. So let's turn to the projects. Just two of our very earliest projects. in urban infrastructure in Boston. These are driven by engineering. They're embedded in the city-required tailor-made responses to very particular complex conditions, finding identity, shape, and silhouette in under-the-radar settings. This first project is the Massport Tobin Bridge Administration Building. It's hung underneath the largest bridge in New England. I promised some of the engineering students we'd talk a little bit about engineering. It's slung under that structure and receives a great deal of salting. And salting is corrosive. And so part of the project was to make a new container for the building, while at the same time letting the operators who take all the money from the tolls operate 24 hours a day. So inside there was a kind of student body left, student body right approach to reorganizing and redoing the interior, while the exterior was reclad also. And then an operation control center for the MBTA, where all of the subway lines that are underground in Boston are operated from. This was a 5-story building. We went up 5 stories vertically, making a new 10-story building, and created a new state-of-the-art control center for that transportation facility. But moving to the recent projects in campus settings, a pair of projects that talk about wrapping. One at the University of Pennsylvania chiller plant, and the other, the University of Cincinnati University Pavilion. These are very different programs. The one on the left is lucky if it has one person in it a day. The one on the right is filled with students night and day, 24 hours a day. But they have in common the large area and constrained available space. The two urban campuses, they're both urban campuses, these. So the conditions of their sites required very dense, compact, freestanding objects whose position was key. And they're internally subdivided rather than an architecture made by adding wings or arms in this particular case. The Penn is a campus infrastructure project at the edge of the river, isolated from the campus by a railroad track. This project was, for the architecture students, was done by competition. There was an invited competition, and we were fortunate enough to be selected by the competition, and the brief was to maximize the available site for recreation and sports, and to maximize the interior of the chiller plant for those functions. So two needs to maximize on one limited site. These are the competition boards. This is a physical model photographed on the roof of our building and digitally inserted into a grassy field. This is a model made in our office that explored the connection between the outer skin wall, which is a free floating element that surrounds an interior rectangular building. Here is the location in Western Philly, to the south of the University of Pennsylvania campus. And you can see the roadways and the highway. The left bridge comes in from the airport. This direction is called University Bridge, It means that this building is a gateway to the campus. It identifies it's the first building that you see as you approach the Penn campus from the airport. It's also their varsity baseball field. The goal was to move the varsity here because they had all the equipment. They could get here easily because they have the buses and vans to take them, and to let the other ball field be used by students on campus. So an important move. And what we have, I mentioned the interior glazed a rectangular building, which we're seeing on the left, and the elliptical screen wall, which is silvery and reflectant in the daytime, but almost transparent at night, with its own foundation and the development of a new material. And the engineering students will notice the tie pin connections at the top that restrain the wall from wind loading deformation. So we developed with manufacturers the idea of a corrugated stainless steel sheets that were perforated so that we could see through them. So the screen wall creates a precinct where the infrastructure is contained and all the trucks in it are contained, and the recreation can occur on the outside. And this was much stronger than the equivalent perforated corrugated aluminum. So here is the glazed rectangle, which vehicles travel through. They come to the end and they can turn around and go through the other path. So large trucks can circulate through the plant and then leave again without getting out onto the ball field or the other recreational areas. Color-coded, and at night revealing the innards of the plant to the traffic, high amounts of traffic that circulate around the building. And with a glowing lighting from the top of these 60-foot tall screen wall. At the University of Cincinnati, we have a student services building located at the heart of the campus. The red circle describes the existing building that was removed. And we do a series of diagrams in looking at siting the buildings so that other important buildings are participating in the campus space, so that we can see the music building and the other important buildings that might otherwise be screened by this building. So we look at the volume and mass that's appropriate. And this is a small model that shows the reconfiguration of what was a ravine into a continuation of the main campus landscape area, the campus quad. And the idea of the building was a window on the campus, a window on this quad. This is, again, a combination of a physical model made out of wood and plastic and a digital ground form so that you can see where the sloping ground is around the building. We're completely free to do collages of these things. And then the building as developed, and the horizontal lines on the window of the campus that we see that are lighter colored are a ceramic frit on the glass. Again, for our chemistry students, the ceramic frit is integral then with the glass because it's applied at very high temperatures. And it provides some screening from the sun. So we have a very narrow atrium space along the whole edge of the building that looks out onto the campus main space. And as a student space and visitor center, it's very important to be able to get oriented. And we were conscious of the proportions of the other buildings and the heights and the need to be an ensemble player on the campus. And the entries are identified with a large canopy and red opening, red metal. There's an open loggia at the top above the atrium space to the left. It's about 16 feet wide for the architecture students, that atrium. And this is what it's like inside, with wood battens on the curving handrail and curving conference rooms up above, kind of an homage to Alto. And again, a canopy and red marker at the main student entrance from the quad. So this is a wrapped building, wrapped in stone and wrapped in glass. And in both night and day, there's a sense of that transparency and welcome into the student center. During the working drawings phase of this project, this is for the architects, the president decided to move into the building on the top floor. The loggia seemed very attractive. It looked out over the football field. So we accommodated that and instantly made a sub-basement for all the mechanical that was up on that roof, and moved the director and other people who were located up on the roof throughout the building, and the administrative group moved in very happily. The next idea is weaving. And these are two small-scale projects woven into the fabric of intimate campus environments. So these are less urban. They're certainly campuses, if limited space, but they are, and neither one of these are freestanding. They're engaged and parts of ensembles. On the left, the Cambridge School of Weston Performing Arts Center, and on the right, the Smith College Fitness Center. At the Cambridge School of Weston, there is a kind of lovely campus quad, very informal, and this large new performance space needed not to overwhelm that delicate fabric. So we looked at using the hillside slope to accommodate some of the volume by pushing it down the slope, and also to use that to our advantage with the performance hall. The metaphor for this building that emerged in working with the client was that of performance at every level. In this case, as well, it's at every physical level and even outside the building, where a informal amphitheater provides the viewing area for the stage-like appurtenance at the first floor. At the opening day of this building, the dance group climbed up and down the walls from the inside and the outside as if they were spiders. They're a great success. Integrated with the trees and slope. Here's again that slope, which allowed us to have many levels of performance. A black box at the bottom, the main theater stage at the middle, the upper lobby, and multi-purpose space, performance space at the top. And here's entering from the top and looking through the site and moving through, in this case, a 14-foot wide space, down throughout the building, but always with a luminous sense of the outdoors, which is very important for this campus. And then the stage, which is for dance, theater, and music. So it was constructed with a small front area and aisle so that the back area could be darkened for small music performances. This school doesn't always have a big audience, and so being able to accommodate small groups and large groups comfortably was part of the brief. And at the Smith College Fitness Center, we inserted between two existing recreational buildings a small fitness center located on campus at the, and again, this is along the river. And the direction towards the main campus is up towards the top of this image. So here is the B scheme, which was located in between a 70s gymnasium on the right and an 1880s gym on the left. And we used some of the existing building as perches for fitness equipment and allowed skylights to bring light in down deep below. And not only solves circulation issues between the two buildings, making them handicapped accessible, but this film of glass stretched between the masonry objects gives high visibility to this very, very small program, which was important on campus. So here you can see some of the old and some of the new. And a spatial connection vertically and to the light. And the final group of our projects, 3 projects at the same institution dealing with the idea of fitting, closely fitting. These are the Harvard Science Center on the left, the Harvard Library Services Building, which is not a public library. This is where they repair all of the important historic books on campus. So it's a support space to all the many libraries on campus. But it does have a public function at the ground floor. And then on the right, the theater at the Hasty Pudding, now called the New College Theater. So the importance here, these were 3 projects for the same institution. They have the same urban setting, and they have the same need for critical fit for institutional purposes and a physical and cultural context. There are active university clients, many voices, all engaged, and there's also a vocal community. That is the community outside the campus. So beyond this framework, each of the 3 projects has enormous site constraints, different engineering and technical challenges. This is the location of the Harvard Science Center, which was a addition and expansion to the Department of History of Science to Jose Luis Sirt's. So this is a landmark, modern landmark, Jose Luis Sirt's Harvard Science Center. And that's a humbling experience to be asked to expand this very special building. And we did this with 3 compact objects of translucent channel glass in dialogue with the existing precast structure and clear glass of the building. You can see certain sketches, which were a little bit different than actually built. So you can see in the lower sketch more mass than in the photo above. And we use those sketches to have a dialogue posthumously with CERT about what would be appropriate in terms of expanding this building. And we created these 3 compact objects, and here you see them in a model. A large one on the right, and a medium one in the left, and a very small one at the top. And here is the context. You can see the addition with the existing, cheek to jowl with Memorial Hall, and the CERT precast you can see on both the right and the left, and then the new insertion is fairly clear. We needed to meet the energy requirements for the building, of course, and so the channel glass is filled with a insulation made out of tiny straws that's compacted into a block. So the full block, full height of the channel glass is filled with this insulation, block of insulation. And then the channel glass, one fits into the other around that insulation and is sealed. And then we have clear glass as well to view out of. So there are offices at the top, so we have more up at that level. And then there are seminar rooms and that sort of thing at the middle area, so we have fewer in there. And then down at the lower level, it's highly glazed as a welcome into the historic instrument collection. And there's a somewhat syncopated rhythm to the addition, and the proportions of the glazing is similar to the CERT. So it's a dialogue or ensemble playing between 2 architects at 2 different times. At one of the more complicated areas, you can see the original precast, including an extension of the stair in the new expansion in glass. So the idea was to be fitting aesthetically as well as fitting physically, while not confounding the idea that there was an original building there. I think you can clearly see all the places the original building was, and can clearly see the new addition. And that was a goal, to be able to always see the original building. And this is for those engineering students and chemistry in the back. We talked about that block of insulation. On the left, you see one of the channels and what it's like to look out of it on the bottom. In the middle, you see one of the channels with that piece of insulation that I mentioned, just a short piece, what it's like to look at in the bottom. And then on the top right, the 2 pieces of channel glass with the insulation. And it gives a kind of glowing, frosted look. So you can see the parts that are insulated and the parts that are double glazing as insulation that are clear. We used computer drawings along with those physical models that I showed earlier. Some of the meetings of this glass and steel and concrete was quite precise, and so the fitting was important physically as well. There's a courtyard with a cafe. We're looking towards the other side of the historic instruments exhibit area, and from the street side. more computer images looking at one of the spaces that extends vertically through the building, and then being in that space. Thinking about the corridor and the rhythm within the building as well as outside the building. Making it commodious. And moving on to the next one, which is that Library Sciences building, which is in a retail area, where the first project, the Louis Cert project, was in the right across from the GSD and in the very kind of heart of the academic community. Now we're moving to the retail life. And to do this, we looked at the streetscape, the rhythm of the existing buildings, both in plan and in elevation. And our site is with the little green box and the little white building below. And we looked at maximizing the volume that was needed for the use while minimizing the volume that was experienced from the street. This meant that we went down deep in the ground, and in this case we had geothermal wells and to reduce the equipment load on the roof so that we wouldn't have noise or view up there. And as well had geothermal wells for heating and cooling. So this is a gold LEED building. Models used to look at that scale that we looked at with respect to the neighborhood and the street were used extensively. And then how it fit in to the immediate streetscape. And here is the building with skylights for the conservancy on the top floor, but no rooftop equipment. From the lower level, with a retail bookstore at the ground level, a passageway through, which Cambridge is full of these little passageways, that was restored and used as a way to view out of the building. You can see the intimacy with the related buildings nearby, the brick building on the other side of the glass. The conservancy area with the north skylights and north wall of glass. What we heard was the most beautiful fire stair from a architectural jury. So I included it. And for those engineers, that's all those standpipes that you need for the water and fire suppression systems. And this is concrete with a wood board pattern, achieving that texture. And from the outside, it's all visible on the retail side. And lastly, the Hasty Pudding Theater. This is this building was built in 1887 by Peabody and Stearns. The Hasty Pudding was a undergraduate theater and social club, and Presidents Ted and Franklin Roosevelt were members. JFK was a member, Alan J. Lerner, Jack Lemmon. This was a place on the Harvard campus to let off steam, and they did. This is also the venue for the Man and Woman of the Year. And at the time when Harvard did not have women students, the guys took over that role as well. So there was a lot of hijinks as part of this theatrical life. But the idea was to make a complete new important theater for the campus, for undergraduates, and to retain the front social rooms. And so we see the existing social rooms, and behind it, a large theater. So we're looking at, again, fitting into a very dense urban site with a kind of jewel box of a theater inside. And this was the partie for that theater. This little model fits in your hand and comes apart in 3 parts. The eventual skyline of the new and the old, the projection of the new in the back alley, the location of the theater embedded within the section, again going deep, deep, deep in the ground with slurry wall construction. And the engineering students, if you don't know about that, you can ask me afterwards. To provide a wonderful new theater. So we have 6 stories of new construction and 3 stories retained at the street edge. Here's one of those retained social rooms, which is where you pick up your tickets. And you come in to, these are real people for those computer users. I have to say that because this looks exactly like the rendering, the computer rendering that was done. But those actually are real people. So a wonderful red box with the full stage accoutrement to make a wonderful new theater. And the kind of fitting and collision of old and new in a dialogue with the main entry approach, either up the stairs or up the ramp beyond. A kind of play barn with a zinc material in the back, and then, of course, the pointed brick in the front. So returning to our metaphor, made to measure, I find it an intriguing way to think about architecture, and I believe it conveys a set of intentions which aptly characterize our work. Made to fit a particular purpose and set of conditions, made with style, skill, precision, and made to last. At least that's our goal. And now, I'm going to take some questions, but first I'm going to just run through some slides so quickly, which is a dense fabric like Boston, because we're going to talk about this. Rome, Boston with the central artery down. The central artery, what it was, the central artery park that it is now. I want to thank you for your contributions to this project. We all paid for this in taxes. It's a terrific project. It's very important for our city, and I'm really serious. It's one of the great projects. And when we look at the $15 billion over 20 years, it's well invested for what it does to the city. And I'd like you to think about, that was a dense weave. My view of Cleveland is of a loose weave, which is quite wonderful. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Hi, thank you for speaking. I was wondering I have 2 questions. I was wondering who your biggest influences are and what you think the most important part of the city that you have to take into account when you're weaving, fitting, or wrapping are.
The first part I got, the second one, can you repeat?
Does the aspects of the city, of the landscape that you're designing your building for change depending on whether you're trying to, the important things that you take into account, do they change depending on whether you're trying to wrap, weave, or fit the building in?
Got it. Okay. So influences. There are definitely influences, and I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to tell you the major influence. It's not there. Okay, major influence is place, where you come from. The image on the right is of a green room. It's a forest. My partner, Andrea Leers, came from the forest of Massachusetts. The left is the desert, whole different world to come from. And so the outlook with respect to where we as individuals stand on the planet informs all of us how we think about things. A great influence, the place that you come from. The second thing is architects we're exposed to. Andrea went to school at Penn at the time that Louis Kahn was teaching there. She was not in his studio, but the whole, he was speaking there. It was alive with the ideas of Louis Kahn. I, 3,000 miles away, was going to school in Arizona with faculty who had learned under Kahn, had been taught by Kahn. So together, Andrea and I share, as an influence, that exposure to Louis Kahn at a very important part of our life. Other influences is the work of Fumiko Maki in Japan, and the kind of proportional systems and vigor and life and rigor of his work. And there are many other influences, but we'll stop there. In terms of the other question, I should get rid of this because this isn't pleasant to look at. We'll go back to that little weaving thing, the loose weave. The idea of the place that in our case, a building is built, because it's situated in one place. It's not like a car that moves around. It's located in one place. So it's deeply involved with that place. If that place has no buildings, but is a untouched natural setting, that is equally strong as if the building is enveloped with other buildings. But there are two different responses. If the building is sitting alone in its landscape versus a building that is surrounded by other buildings. In the latter case, I mentioned a lot ensemble playing, dialogue, because the surrounding setting, it's like a conversation between the new and what was there already and what is coming, the future. And so it's very much influenced by then the spaces or buildings around the piece. It's also influenced by how people are going to use it. What is it used for? What does it need to be like on the inside? Does it need a lot of perimeter for windows? Does it need to be enclosed? All of those then, I think one of your exercises I was hearing, you look at it from the inside for a semester and then you look at it from the outside from the semester. I may not be saying that quite right. But that is exactly the operations that must happen for it to both work well for the people who are using it and work well for the people who just experience it by walking by. So it's a important dialogue, both directions. That was a wonderful question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Litt, the architecture critic at the local newspaper. I couldn't help but notice images of the Marcel Breuer Ameritrust Tower on your computer. You know that's a controversial issue here in Cleveland. I thought I would ask you to comment on that.
Well, let me go to the real crux of the problem. Cleveland needs an architectural school. Cleveland needs to hear voices repeatedly of architects, urban designers, artists in dialogue with this city. And that is what is most important, is that this community, not what I think, but what this community, through dialogue, discussion, hashing, gnashing, works out. That's what's really important. And to do that, I think just Cleveland would be so much better off with an architecture school because of the dialogue that it promotes. This is wonderful what is happening here, this dialogue that is happening. But it's very, very important that that is woven into the fabric of what happens to Cleveland. Now, you ask my opinion. I'm just an outside. Pardon? I understand that it did, and it should again. Yeah, it's had a hiatus. Those folks must have cleaned up their acts, whatever they were doing. It's needed, it's necessary. It's the mother of the arts. And we have in Cleveland a growing arts infrastructure. The museum is growing, has wonderful architects coming in. It needs its own voices that comes out of this ground. And I hope it gets it. And I hope the people that go out to school in the meantime come back, because this is real, real important. What I think about the Breuer building is that Cleveland is a dense weave, a loose weave, and and because of that, I don't see taking it down, number one. Number two, we looked at the CERT building, which is a landmark. Not everyone loves the CERT building. It's a magnificent building, and there have been times when it's been in fashion, out of fashion. That will happen again. It's the dialogue that's important with our past. It's the ideas that were strong and how we feel about them. But to take them down, we don't have that strong dialogue anymore. So to me, it's a loss to lose something, even if part of the community is not so wild about it. It's an important part of the history of Cleveland. It's a fine architect. It's a piece of this history, and there will be research papers done on this 50 years from now. But they won't be done the same way if it doesn't exist. So my sense is it's important in many different ways, and I probably haven't gotten to all of them, but that's my take of it. It was the thing I heard in Des Moines. They're thinking of taking the Breuer building down. Oh my God, this is a cause célèbre. Get with it. Stamp this out. And you can do it. These are politicians. There's a political science person here, I know. She will give us the answers. So, good luck. And if you need outside resources, call. This is...
Hi. I just wanted to say that there is an effort to continue that dialogue and discussion about modernism and preservation and sustainability. And I'm not an architect, I'm not an urban planner, but I do enjoy looking at beautiful things, and the Breuer Tower was one of those, and it became part of my passion. So there are postcards about the upcoming lecture and film series on the back table as you exit. Okay, enough of a commercial. I am fascinated to know if you would expand, please, on the loose weave of Cleveland, and what, if you were playing SimCity and had all the money and all the commissions, what would you, anything, a dream for that loose weave?
Okay. Um, the I'm going to go around the side door to get at this one. The wonderful thing here is that you have a cultural infrastructure that is very vibrant. You have a housing stock that's fairly affordable. You are attractive to young, well-educated, smart, vigorous people, otherwise known as the future. And that is terrific. You have an open space that at least looked beautiful today. The loose weave, I think, in my mind, indicates the possibility for repeated park areas of different shapes and character. Sally took me today on a tour of I'm not going to get the names right, the terminal park and the mall and the little zigzag in between and the Galleria and the little park by the library that connects you over. I adored the fact that this wasn't a huge mega design that was, Beaux-Arts, everything. You could see everything from every angle, and you're done with it. I love that it was evolved as you moved through places, each with a different character. And you have this throughout the city. There are areas with a lot of parking at grade. There are areas where buildings have come down. There's the potential for thinking about the loose weave as the kind of green character of Cleveland. You have, again, going through the other side door, the infectious sports attitude here. The ability to go downtown and be at your football stadium and come out afterwards and go to 90 different bars. To go to your football stadium, to go to your baseball stadium, to go to your basketball stadium, all downtown. Totally fabulous. So to make the transit connections from other communities, there's a few transit connections, to maybe enhance strategically over time other transit connections from the loose weave into the center. I was very encouraged to hear that there's more housing going up in the center, because the loose weave thrives on having points of greater density along with the loose weave. So I think there is a vibrant opportunity here to have a vision restated over time and time again, a shared vocabulary between the larger community of people who are interested, whether they're architects, urban designers, artists, teachers, scholars, whatever, that they have that interest in their community where they live, and they have a voice in how to make it the next positive step, and a vision of how that can add up. That would be my goal.
First, I just want to comment. As you know, Cleveland doesn't have the inner city fabric that New York and Boston, for example, Greenwich Village and Cambridge. And Baltimore, I understand, does have something like that downtown, as well as Philadelphia. I think that's one thing that's probably missing in the Cleveland area. What's going up are large megastructures that don't have that intimate feeling of a small street, crowded and urban, but not large and overpowering. My real question is, or comment is, starts from two concepts. Knowing the architects in Cleveland here, there are a handful of very talented architects, some of who have done some very nice things in Cleveland. However, Cleveland is not known for architects who lead or go into the arena of being well known and being well respected nationally and internationally. My question, I guess, is, although architects and architect offices are smattered and they get their notoriety in a variety of ways, but once they get known, they get touted like Britney Spears. Do you feel, being in Boston, one of those few areas that are known for architecture, that New York and maybe one or two others, that the presence of respected or revered architectural firms and individuals bring more architecture to that area than would otherwise be? We tend to go, when there's a very special plum in Cleveland, to go to outsiders, like IMP, for example, HOK, other people like that.
Sure. Well, certainly in Boston and Cambridge, we have many architects from around the world, very fine architects working. So we have our Starchitecture tours that we could take in the Boston-Cambridge area. So we have the same phenomenon, and I think it's kind of healthy, actually, that there's this collision of architectural ideas. I'll go back to the fact that in Massachusetts we have, I think now 7 architectural schools, and all but one of them is in Boston. So now we are, for the New England region, have a critical mass of architecture future, lifeblood coming in there. To me, that is the ability to put that energy into what then happens with all of those architects. Those architects can't just work in Boston. There's no way. And a lot of them do go home, go back to Korea or go back to wherever. But a lot of them stay, but they export the work because there is this vital architectural energy. And so that's what my biggest wish for Cleveland is to have that vital architecture energy homegrown, bringing in these firms from outside, having a dialogue with them.
Are you saying it's the architects or the educational facilities, or both? Is there like a playback, like playing pool together, or there's something missing, has always been something primarily missing, something that doesn't exist, only exists in places like New York and Boston. It doesn't happen here.
Maybe, maybe I'm, I think I just think there's a critical mass of questioning voices that allow architects to be more bold. There's just more understanding of what it's about. And so I think I think architects here can also thrive and do more with more architectural voices behind them. That's all.